Self-recharge, baby.
My time coming, know it is, cause I didn't pray for it. I'm in a suit day and night, yeah, I done slaved for it. I never knew that if I rap, I could get paid for it. State to state, different cities with the gang touring. He ain't a beast, if he played, I had the gang storm him. It's on the love, if you my brother, we got the same story. Yeah, what you know about a kick, though? You wasn't with me, I was running.
All right. Beautiful people. What's good? It's your boy Smith. Welcome to Public Comment. It's my podcast. And as you know, we ran a test show about 2-3 weeks ago with my boy Troy to kind of add a little bit more engagement on a visual level. And so that's why you get to see me now, right? Nothing's changed other than that. We're still going to keep our fundamentals the same. You know, positivity, motivation, and education. I think it's paramount now these days, especially when we're trying to engage young folks. I think a lot of young folks don't want to be told; they want to be heard, but they also kind of need some seasoned guidance to get them to kind of start the process of engaging and being voiceful and learn how powerful their voices are. So, with that said, I did a lot of thinking over, I don't know, probably the past year of like, where do I want to take the podcast? And, ever since I've started it, it's been super organic. Whatever happens. And so far it's been doing exactly what it needs to do. And probably over the last 2-3 weeks, I'm thinking, man, what can I do? What can I do? Kids are getting out of school. We're not going to have that contact with them on a daily basis. And then after a trip to Houston, while I was in Houston, I was like, wow, Black women. That's what we need to talk about. And so put some thought to the paper. And so now this is the first episode of what I'm calling the summer series, Black Women 2023. I have a few lined up. One of them is joining us today. I'll introduce you to the phenomenal lady real shortly here. And we're going to discuss everything under the sun related to being a Black woman, whether that's parenting, education, workplace, corporate world, healthcare, whatever, daycare, whatever, just being a Black woman in general, right? And kind of let them share their stories, their anecdotes, their journeys. And that way we can share it with young Black women who can see and maybe have some kind of visual idea of what success looks like. Because I think young people don't know what success is until they're introduced to success and they define their own success. I think, unfortunately, right now, a lot of young people are basing their success off of what they see on social media, which is a bunch of filtered down best representations of people. And that's not always accurate, So with that said, this is Public Comment. I am Smith. You know where to find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter for your listening and now for your viewing pleasure. So let's get this going. I'm honored that this young lady is our first to lead off the summer series of Black Women 2023. I don't want to lie and say how we met. I do believe we met at a city council meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
absolutely. And that wonderful voice you hear and you're going to see on your screen is the wonderful Mrs. Anna Petero. I'm going to read you her bio really quick, and then she can go into maybe want to dive into it a little bit more. So Anna was born in Fiji, which is phenomenal. I've never met anyone from Fiji. So this is already awesome. Has lived in the United States for 47 years. Anna is an adjunct professor at Solano College and Napa Valley College, where she teaches public speaking, argumentation, and debate, as well as interpersonal communications. That is a lot. Anna also coached the speech and debates team at Solano College for 17 years. Upon retiring from coaching, Anna was elected to the Fairfield-Sassoon Unified School District Governing Board in 2020, where she has served for 2 years. Anna is a wife, a mother of 5, and a grandmother of 5. In her spare time, she is a volunteer umpire for Little League Baseball in Fairfield. Now, that's one heck of a bio. Mrs. Petero, welcome to the show, man. How are you
Thank
today?
you very much, sir. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. So before I would have never guessed Little League umpire. How did that come about?
Well, my family are very avid sports fans, and I'm a 49er fan. My husband is a Rams fan. I
Okay.
like
Oh,
the A's. He likes the Dodgers, and so I live in a man cave. We have 3
absolutely.
televisions in our house, and I live in a home full of boys. Now
Okay.
my young children are gone, and so in order to stay engaged, I wanted to learn more about baseball. I thought I knew about sports. I thought, well, I can be an umpire, so
Mhm.
I can be more versed about baseball and can converse with them and engage
Okay.
with them. And so I
Okay.
thoroughly enjoyed it. And I look at baseball like education. At the very beginning of the season, the children are learning how to, use a mitt and finding their little positions and everything. And they can't catch fly balls. And
Oh,
then you
yeah.
see them progress throughout the year. And by the time they get to the playoffs, they're catching fly balls so easily. They're right under the ball.
Mhm.
So you get to see the game from their perspective. And as
Wow.
children, you see, wow, here's where they're learning. And the intenseness comes from the coaches, right? Because the
Absolutely.
kids, you see them in the dugout and they're like, oh, whose house are we going to go play at after this?
Right.
What are we going to have for snacks? Meanwhile, the coaches are going, he's safe, he's this, and arguing with the umpires. So being among children and watching them grow is another form of education, is why I love doing it. And now I feel like I know a little bit better, a little more
Okay.
about baseball. And
Okay.
I am more sympathetic to umpires' calls.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay.
But
Okay.
thank goodness for instant replay.
Well, I know you guys don't have instant replay, right?
No, we don't. But
Okay.
watching the professionals, I go, yeah, because you make a lot of errors,
Right.
and
Right.
parents get upset, and it was
Wow.
so wonderful. Also helps you with conflict management because you have to tune out all the parents. That was a terrible call. Oh, blue, and so you just tune that out and focus on the kids, on the little players, and it's brilliant. I love it.
That is amazing. Thank you for volunteering. I know that's not an easy job.
Yes.
All 3 of our kids, our daughter played softball, and then both the boys play baseball. So I definitely understand how some of the vitriol can be expressed upon the umpire. So
Yes.
I'm gonna actually have to come out there and watch one of your games. I really love baseball. So
It was
um,
fun being just one of the only female baseball umpires. And so I made sure I umpired in pearl. So
wow. Hey, hey, hey. Listen,
get more
listen.
women out there in the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Say we're going to touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I get so disappointed, frustrated, and furious when I hear nowadays, especially in 2022, 2023, and going forward. Unfortunately, I'm sure there'll be more. It's like, oh, well, this is the first woman to do
Hmm.
this or do that. And I'm like, what? Really? We're in 2023 and we're still having the first. And then, just to bring it all more home, we get to this point where, oh, it's the first Black woman too. And I'm like, what? Again? You know,
Yes.
and I always say this, man, like either when I'm making statements or posting stuff on social media, I'm like, how can America call itself the most progressive country in the entire world, and we are so far behind in just the normal aspects of humanity and treating people with
Hmm.
dignity?
Hmm.
I think it's just speaks on the hypocrisy of
Yes.
where we are.
Yes.
Um, Ma'am, let's talk about this because I
Mm.
think that was a great when you talked about umpiring and then little kids in education, watching them. You get a little kid out here who doesn't know how to hold a glove or the
Hmm.
bat or run the base properly. It's just like a kindergartner going into class,
Yes.
finding their seat, right? Seeing how their name is spelled, right? You
Hmm.
know, I know you're big on education. What moved you to get into education in that field?
My father was a teacher, and he was a brilliant teacher.
Outstanding.
And he really instilled in me the importance of learning.
Mhm.
When I was a little child, one of my favorite memories of my father was he taught at a school, and I was in first grade, so our school was half day. So I'll go sit in his classroom and observe him as he taught. And he was very strict, but he was a very fair teacher.
Mhm.
And on our way home from school, we would talk about what I learned at school that day. Here I am in the first grade. Dad's teaching, and he's absorbing everything that I'm telling him
Mhm.
about school. And so he made me really enjoy school, and he challenged me as well. He would tell me things like, I bet you can't be the top of your class. I can't bet you can't do this. He used reverse psychology on me. And
Right.
so I would say, yes, of course I can. And so we'd have bets at the beginning of the year. So he really made learning fun for me.
Mhm.
And just how are you applying what you're learning from when I was 6 years old?
Right.
And he gave me just a sense of wanting to learn. And so I have 3 older sisters who are teachers. And so,
Family business.
yes, family business. My grandfather was a teacher, and my
Wow.
dad's first cousin started the first university in the South Pacific in Tonga in the
Outstanding.
1970s, where the people from the islands, Cook Islands or Tuma, other islands, would come there to study. So it's, like you said, in my blood. And I've always wanted to be an 8th grade English teacher.
Okay. Okay. Any particular reason?
Because you think about 12 and 13-year-olds, right?
Yes.
They are the most vulnerable age and the most impressionable. And that's when they need so much positive reinforcement, because that's when the bullying happens.
Yes.
That's when the cliques happen.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be autonomous. They're not children. They're not quite teenagers. And the hormones are kicking in, right?
Yes.
And they want to, be
Yes.
their own little people. And I think that's where we need so much positive reinforcement, telling them how good they look, telling them how bright they are, as opposed to criticizing them.
Right.
Because then they become 14, 15 years old and the clothes get darker, the hoodies come over the face, and then they're low self-esteem. But if we push them and encourage them, I think that's the crossroads of whether we like high school or education or we don't like education.
I agree.
And that's when junior high school happens. I wish I had taught that, but I wound up going to college. I enjoyed the speech and debate team, and that's where I wound up teaching in college. But that was my first love. And I still now, one of my assignments that I have in my public speaking classes is, how did you become the person you are? And I would say 99% of the time, students talk about their junior high school as being pivoting point in their lives. And when the bullying happens, or when traumatic situations happen in their lives around that time. And the adults don't cope with it very well. That have younger siblings who don't know how to cope, because parents seem to forget what it was like when they were 12 and 13 years old. They educate from the perspective of where they are now. Well, you got to suck it up. You got to do this. But Mom, you were 13 at one time. How did you cope?
Absolutely.
Because we tell them, don't listen to other people. Well, that's easy to say when you're 28 years old, when you're 30 years old. But when you're 13, it's a whole different ballgame. And we tend to forget that.
Yeah.
And so that is a precious time for me, 12 to 13 years old.
That is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. I agree with every point you just touched on wholeheartedly. I say it all the time. That 12, 13. And then the crazy part is, for the most part, and I know it differentiates different school districts you go to, but for the most part, middle school is 2 years, 7th and 8th grade, right? You only get it for 2 years.
Yes.
You go from having one teacher all day with the same group of friends in 6th grade to now 7 different teachers, different people in different classes. To your point, your body is changing. The world around you is changing. All of these different things. And then we put all of this pressure on these young people to make the right decisions. Like, really?
Right. That's a lot,
That is a lot, right? You're trying to fit in and all, and then, like you said, suck it up. Well, suck what up? What?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So
they got the cliques and everything.
Yes.
Which clique? I don't want to belong to this clique. And then what happens? And you have the ones who ostracize it. It's just, yes, we need to do better for our children.
I agree 1,000%, and I agree with you. 8th grade is very, very crucial. It's a tipping point. But I do want to circle back and touch on something you said in the beginning. So your father and your grandfather were both educators.
Yes.
In your field, in your expertise of talking to fellow educators, would you say, and I'm asking this question for a reason, would you say that most of those, your colleagues, their parents or some family member was also in the educational field? The reason I asked that question, why you think about it, the reason I asked that question for people is because when I'm in these classrooms, I'm talking to these young folks and I ask them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Never have I heard someone say a teacher. And what I think that is it's not sensationalized. All they see is the NBA or what's on TV, or you always get it. Oh, I want to be a lawyer. Most kids don't even know what a lawyer does. So, but I'm always curious. Like I say, introduce kids to education early. In every single class, every single day, some student should be up in front leading a portion of that class for the day to introduce them to what teaching is. So my question is based on that. Do you find that a lot of your colleagues, their family members, they come from a tradition of education in their family?
Some, but not all. My husband, for example, also teaches at Solano College. His father was a firefighter. And my husband is the first person in his family to go to college.
Outstanding.
And he's white. Isn't that interesting?
Wow. So I never
So
guessed it, right?
exactly. So you think, most people who are socioeconomically advantaged or come from middle class families and are of a white background also have had generations of college. But
Yes.
there's some who didn't, and his parents didn't emphasize college. So you turn 18 years old, you move out of the house, you find yourself a job, because that's what his father did.
Hmm.
But my husband went on a wagon train in 1976 during the bicentennial, and
Okay.
he was spreading Christian literature throughout. He went from Southern California to Arkansas. When he came back, he decided to take a couple of classes in college and liked it. He
Hmm.
took a public speaking class, and his professor told him he should join the speech and debate team. That's when he wanted to become a teacher. It took
Hmm.
college for him to do it. But his pathway to college was, I just want to learn something new, learn a new trade, because I didn't learn it. I didn't, don't have a transition from high school to college.
Hmm.
Many of my colleagues would have, like, their parents were college professors or but I would say the majority, no, because I'm
Wow.
looking at my students who
Hmm.
are many of my former students who are on the speech and debate team. Many of them are high school teachers or professors as well, but they didn't have family members who are educators.
Okay.
So it also, I think a lot of them, it takes a teacher, a special
Mhm.
teacher to influence a person to become a teacher. I
Absolutely.
became I wanted to be an eighth grade English teacher. It was my public speaking professor from Chabot College who encouraged me to join the speech and debate team. It took
Wow.
me a year to join, but once I got into it and loved it, my undergraduate degree is in English,
Okay.
but I wanted to coach the speech because, like I said, I wanted to be an English teacher. But
Hmm.
when I
Hmm.
got to graduate school and I was coaching the speech and debate team as a volunteer, I really liked it. And so that's what propelled me into going and teaching communication studies. 2 weeks into grad school, I changed my major from English with an emphasis in linguistics to speech and debate, to speech communication.
Okay.
And that's how I got there. So while I
Okay.
wanted to be a teacher, my pathway went a different way. It was because of the influence of a teacher.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like
Right.
somebody, you have a fantastic theater teacher, fantastic biology teacher, a
Hmm.
fantastic English teacher. It's like, I'm going to be a teacher. But like you said, it's very far in between, few in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That
so,
and
yeah.
to your point, I had one teacher who changed my whole outlook on math. Like
Mm,
from seventh grade, eighth grade, and ninth grade, I failed algebra. That
mm,
was a different time.
right.
I don't think they do algebra anymore. But
Yeah.
I failed it, and then I ran across, and I ran across. I was put into Mr. Giles' class,
Mm,
San Leandro High School, and he made it so crystal clear and simple for me. I aced everything from that point on
nice.
in math, and I will never forget Mr. Guile. Like, you know, that like you said, there's always one teacher that's like phenomenal, and so that's why I also say to this point, and maybe you can relate, you
Mm,
know, because I know some of the work you do in the community, which we'll touch on soon. Maybe this disconnect, right, of the student teacher relationship.
mhm.
I think a lot of students just think of instructors or educators just as these robots who just show up in this classroom. They never leave
Right.
the classroom.
Right.
They don't have a life.
Mhm.
So do you, when you see like a student who you think might be struggling, or maybe just nervous or anxious, how do you knock that barrier down and to create that interpersonal relationship and kind of bring out their energy to do the best they can?
Mhm. I lecture less and let them talk more.
Mm.
So what I do is I divide my classes into 3 parts. I
Mhm.
give a brief lecture and for about 10 minutes, because students now, they have shorter attention spans, right?
Yes.
Not
Yes.
like us when we went to school. We could sit through a 3-hour class with a
Right.
15-minute break, right? And this
Right.
is in the evening after work.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
nowadays
Yes.
they have very short attention spans because of,
Mhm.
look at there's a ubiquity of information out there. So there's so many places to go get your information that to hold their attention span is very challenging. So
Yes.
I lecture for 10 minutes, and then I put them in groups to talk about what we did, and then they apply it.
Mhm.
And so it gives them an opportunity to share and talk among themselves, and they share their ideas with me. We were talking a little earlier about, students thinking out of the box. When
Yes.
you're in K through 12, they tell you color between the lines, and you're told what to do. We don't get to use the children's creativity.
Mhm.
So in classrooms where I did at the college level, I try to lecture as little as possible, and then let the organic, like just give them the basic structure, skeleton of what I'm talking about, and let them come up with the ideas. ideas, and then here's how to apply it, and we do it as a group. Because sometimes, because students learn differently, right? Some of our audio listeners, some are
Yes.
tactile, some
Yep.
are visual, and so
Mhm.
what a person may not have heard, somebody can display
Mhm.
and then tell them. And then students have a different way of communicating, you know,
Yes.
because they're a
Yes.
different generation,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
they can relate an example to a concept that I've taught, and their peers will understand it. You
Mhm.
know, I'm still stuck in the 1970s, for example,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. Yes.
I listened
Yes.
to music in the 1970s and
Yes.
whatnot. So our examples tend to be older. So when I listen to students, I get up to date on what it is that they're
Mhm.
talking about. I read Rolling Stone magazines just to see what the music is, because
Right.
I just
Right.
don't know music
Right. Right.
nowadays
Right.
that
Right.
relate to it, right? I'm
Absolutely.
still learning about
Absolutely.
hip hop, and I love hip hop
Yeah.
now that I
Right.
learned
Right.
when I listen to the lyrics, I go, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
But now I'm listening to hip hop from the 1990s. These guys are in 2023.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
That
so it's
that
those things. I try to lecture less and let it
Mhm.
come from the students. And I think this is where we need to go with K through 12, because
Yes.
what we're doing is we're testing the children on their first day of school. It's like, what?
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
opposed to going, here's, because they'll know what they want. And what we do is that we just follow them. And if this is where your
Yes.
creativity is, it's in the arts, it's in the sciences, and then cultivate them. And I think at the end of the year, these children can put a project together. It could be any kind of creativity. It could be a video, it could be a scrapbook, it could be
Mhm.
something that they've created, and do a presentation of it at the end of class one, first grade. Take that portfolio to the second grade and
Mhm.
build on that. So by the
Mm.
time you get
Mm.
to the 12th grade, you have all of these ideas and you see some kind of format that these children have learned, and they have 12 years of experience there, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to a test which is on a Scantron, which they probably won't remember. But if we
Absolutely.
have a portfolio, then we can guide them. So maybe you want to go to trade school, maybe you want to go to college, maybe you want to start a business and be an entrepreneur. We have that whole foundation of 12 years with us. So
I love
yeah,
that idea. That
yeah.
is that's the best idea I heard yet, you know.
Hmm.
And I just want to make sure that I recognize and acknowledge that, you know, you bring a outside of the box thinking into the classroom.
Hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of our challenges is when it comes to our community,
Hmm.
that, you know, the education system is structured against us
Yes.
being creative. And so I'm glad you shared that with me and the listeners, how you present your classroom, how you break it down and allow the input of the student, because I think
Hmm.
that is super, super important. And as you know these numbers, and I just want to share them really quick, you know, just the rate of young Black and Latino men um,
Hmm.
leaving high school with less than 35% proficiency in math and
Yeah.
English. I challenge that because I do not believe that is the fault of these men. Um,
Hmm.
I honestly believe it is the messenger.
Yes.
So, you know, as you well know, I run my organization. We have math tutoring. And in our math tutoring, we purposely have young Black, Latinos, and Asian people, or students, I should say, doing the tutoring for the younger kids.
Hmm.
One, now we can relate. Now I see you. You look like me. You sound like
Yes.
me. To your point, I listen to music from the 80s. These kids are listening to something today. So I think changing the dynamic of the visual aspect of who's the educator, right,
Right.
helps
Right.
promote exactly what you're saying. I'm
Hmm.
going to let you do this, you know, because and I'm gonna let you guys learn from one another, because
Yes.
peer pressure in a positive way could probably teach you more than what I can teach you
Yes.
talking for 45 minutes straight, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so thank you for being that open-minded with your classroom, which leads me or us in this conversation into the next area, I think. And I don't want to discount and cut off the education part. But I think, you know, for the sake of time and just the
Yes.
collaboration of everything that you do, I think the transition into just speaking on just social impact, civil rights, if you want to call it. And I really
Hmm.
want to challenge that phrase also,
Hmm.
because I know what you do, and civil rights is a big part of your life and your legacy and your contribution to our society, right? I think sometimes we get so complacent with the
Hmm.
words being used, and we
Hmm.
lose the energy of understand how powerful they are.
Hmm.
Civil rights, social justice for Black people, specifically Black women in
Hmm.
this country. Do you think it is become a mundane repetition of saying Black women need civil rights or the lack of civil rights. Do you think it's time to change that word, that wording, civil rights? Is it time for an upgrade? Is it time for a reinvestment, a restructure, a refocus on the civil rights and the social equalities that come along with being a Black woman?
I think the term wokeness is very apropos. And people, they disparage that word because think of wokeness, it's about an awakening, right? You're woken up to realize that there are things that aren't right. If you're still asleep, then things are right for you all the time. Right. So civil rights is a building of people, and people turn and twist those words in terms of civil rights and human rights and whatnot. And they create it for all people, and that's for the majority of the people, do those who are in charge. But if you look at the term wokeness and why they're so vehemently against that word, because it is an awakening. So if you look at from the very beginning, they talk about America being an experiment of self-governance, right? Well, with experiments, when the ingredients change, you change the experiment, right? So look at from the very, very beginning when Native Americans lived here, and then people started infiltrating. The Europeans started infiltrating. Barack Obama wrote in his book, The Dreams of My Father, where when Kenya became colonized by the British, it's because he said people didn't notice them. So they were living in their country, and all of a sudden a couple of tourists came in. And then all of a sudden, they didn't know that's just innocuous. And then more white people started coming in. And then more white people started coming in. And then all of a sudden, they came in, started giving you the drugs and the alcohol, and they started taking over your government. They go, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. We're taking over. That's what happened. My father once said to me, he said, we people of color are the smartest people in the world. Our problem is that we shared. Because we had all the resources. So they came and took from us. They didn't have, right? The Indians were eating spices, eating hot food, right? They were tearing meat out, eating steak tartare, just out of the carcass pretty much. Right. And all of that. So you look at how our country has changed. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was about wokeness. They talk about, it was like we were awakened to women don't have the right to vote. Black women don't have the right to vote. Black men don't have the right to vote. We need citizenship. The Native American, the people who own this country didn't get citizenship until 1924. 1924, and this is theirs. And so you look at American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism is our heterogeneity. It is our diversity. So it makes this country great. And as long as, like you said, there are too many firsts in 2023, we need to examine that and go, why are there so many firsts? And then it comes back down to education and who was making the rules. Who was in government? There's still, if you look at the Republican side, not to make this political, majority white men, right? You look at the Democratic side, there are women and there are men, but how many women of color are there? Unless you have a voice and unless it's have a place there, your voice will not be heard. Right. You look at this reproductive rights of women, they're being taken away. Why? Because the majority of people who are in Congress are men. Why would they think about women's reproductive rights? They're men. And with their women, they have excellent health care. And so they have their ways of getting around their health care. They don't care about anybody else. Right. And so that's why I look at civil rights. I look at human rights. I think the term wokeness is very simple. It's very apropos, and it's something that we can fight and advocate for, because awokeness is an awakening. Who does not want to be awake?
Hey, outstanding. Thank you for that. Before we go any further, I just, as a man who I have grown to fall in love with words are phenomenal. And I just want to make sure that I acknowledge all those wonderful words you're using. I can't remember them all, but when I revisit this video, I'm definitely going to write them down. I think our young people have lost the thirst to learn words.
And reading is fundamental.
Oh my goodness. If I told you a story right now to break your heart, but I don't want to share it with you, I'll tell you sometime later. But yeah, and so I think so with the wokeness, and you probably seen the viral clip going around where the Black lady asked the white lady, well, so what is woke? And she could not explain it, right? But I like how you said it's an awakening, right? To that point, to keep it on the subject, to share really quick, I was at a conference back in March where a brother said, the only way we can become Black excellence is to acknowledge that it exists. Right? And so when we talk about acknowledging Black women, and I'm not trying to be like overly dramatic, but we have to acknowledge that Black women exist, and that we need to address some of the still installed, unseen, unwritten, unspoken barriers that prevent Black women from succeeding in everyday life, whatever walk that may be in, right? So how do you propose, because we talked about this before the show started, but how do you propose we engage young Black women to become more vocal about their rights?
Teaching them from when they're very, very little, and giving them positive reinforcement, because young Black girls are sexualized already. There's this great book by Nikki Kendall called Hood Feminism. And while you look at, young women of color, they're sexualized by society overall, while little white girls are looked as little fragile and dolls, right? Look at how we look at National Geographic and how we look at pornography, right? When you look at National Geographic and you see a Black woman with her breast exposed, that's called culture or nature, right? And then you look at it in a Playboy magazine, it's sexualized, right? Because they're already sexualized us already.
Right.
So I think how we encourage little girls is start with their hair. Because this little thing called good hair, bad hair, what is that, right? But whenever I see a young girl, a little Black girl, no matter what she looks like, I tell her she's beautiful.
Yes.
And you admire her hair, because what's great is our hair is versatile. That's what's the beauty of us, is we're versatile. This country was built on the backs and the wombs of Black women. They learned about gynecology because of Black women. Their children were taken away from them, and they have fought, and while they were nursing other people's babies. That's how strong Black women are, and I think people are afraid of Black women because that is how strong. When democracy needs to be saved, who do they go to? They go to the Black women. Especially if you look at most recently. I learned about my Blackness from this wonderful young lady by the name of India Johnson, because I didn't know how I fit into this culture. Coming from Fiji, coming from the islands, I grew up in Hawaii. So we didn't learn about slavery per se, right? But the colorism exists in our family, in our country, because we were colonized as well.
Absolutely.
So not only this is the magic of whiteness, right? They came and told us that they preached to us, and they said, oh, you're going fire and brimstone, you're going to hell. And they told us we were savages. And then we come over here and fight for our rights after they yelled at us, and go, oh, they create these rules. Here's how we talk to each other. Right. And so when you suppress us so badly and you come up for air, you're gasping and you're fighting, and they go, oh no, we don't talk like that. Right. And so coming here, I came to this country thinking I'm just as equal as everybody else. Look at Barack Obama's story. He's just as equal to everybody else. And this young lady said to me in India, she goes, do you identify as Black? And I go, am I allowed to?
Right.
I didn't think I could, because I don't get to claim African-American heritage, Black American heritage. I'm from the islands. And so she goes, you're a Black Fijian Tongan. And from then on, I was so proud, because I knew this is the color of my skin.
Yes. Yeah.
But I was always identified as a Pacific Island. Now I'm a Black person from the Pacific Islands. I felt so empowered by that. When I was in Tonga as a child, because they revered white skin because it's close to the white people. And my father, I came home crying one day because the children were calling me names. And my father looked at me and he said, dark chocolate is sweeter.
Say that.
And ever since he said that, I felt so confident. And I love the color of my skin. And now, just as of last 2 years ago, I get to own the color of my skin.
Okay.
And that's where Black women need to be more empowered. And we need to be places where we have a voice. We need more Black women in elected office, because unless we're there, our voices don't get heard.
Absolutely.
Because unless we look like us, like look at students, and look at a Black woman who's a teacher, I can be a teacher too. Yes. Right. I can be in politics. I can do this because they look like me. I had a student tell me, you're the first person of color, a Black woman I've had as a teacher. It took me to go to college to have a Black woman as a teacher.
And that's the unfortunate reality of the society we live in.
Yeah.
I shared with a colleague of mine, a white woman, and I said, I never had a Black man as a teacher, K through 12. And this is right. And this is the crazy part. She said, me neither. Now, let that one sink in. Like two people totally different lacked or never got to experience a Black man standing in front of the class, leading the class, teaching you something. That whole phenomenon is powerful by itself.
Yes.
Imagine what she could have learned. Imagine what I could have learned. Imagine how we both could have been inspired to do something different had we seen that symbolism. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, like owning this and going back to that cliche phrase, representation matters. We are truly in a time, just like you said, we need Black women to be in spaces where they have historically not been allowed to participate in.
Yes.
We can circle back really quick to our Supreme Court Justice, Mrs. Brown.
Yes.
Like
I
always said, like, how can the highest court in the land be called such when it verifies specific laws or rights and is passed down to Black women, but there's not one Black woman on that Supreme Court? That always boggled my mind.
Yeah.
And again, like, how do we get there? How do we get there is not my number one question. It's going to be my question to you and to the rest of the panelists as they come on over the course of the summer, is how do we, because here, the phrase I live by that I share with young people when I go speak to them is the great Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong boys than repair broken men.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think we need to somehow transition that phrase over to our young Black women. And I'll put it out there again to you. I know I asked you, but I know you said education, but then what's the follow-up, right? So we got school, right?
Yep.
We got school. Our kids can go to school, but then what? Then what? How do we recruit? That's the point. How do we recruit and retain young Black women and kind of lead them into those spaces of offices, elected officials?
There's a Native American saying that says, listen to the elders and follow the youth, right? So while we're educating them, we have to reinforce that all along the way. We can't just go, okay, you're going to school and join all of these different clubs and take these academic classes. Every single day of their lives, we have to reinforce that.
Yes.
Because you have challenges all day, right? And so when you see your daughters, when you see your sisters, when you see your cousins who are girls, right? Encourage them. You look nice today. That's a great outfit. What'd you learn today? Sit and talk to them, because once we fill that gap, because remember, your information is everywhere, right? And so they're easily distracted. So once you engage them, ask them what they're interested in. And listen to them. That's when we can get them into and give them the passion. Take them to, like those of us who belong to clubs, take them to a political function. I'm inviting you to this, right? Take them to whatever function that you want to, so that they can be exposed to that, especially when they're junior high school. And then you reinforce and be the change you want to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi said that. What do you want to be? Find out when they're little kids, and then every single day, like I said, to little girls, little boys, I love your hair. Your hair looks great. And I started saying that when I saw this wrestling match where this young man had dreadlocks. The coaches came and cut his hair.
I seen that.
And that devastated me. That's like Samson, his hair cut off. And nobody stood up for him.
That right?
It took until 2020, I think. What year was that? It was just in this century where Gavin Newsom signed you cannot discriminate against a person because of their hair. It's the 21st century, and we're still talking about our hair. It's a small thing, but it's a big thing.
Yes.
Right?
Like the nonsensical notion that we had to pass a law about hair.
Yes.
Right? Where do we? But
and look at the colorfulness of our country. It is so bland. Look at the way we dance. Look at our music, right? Look at our fashion. That's what makes America exceptional. Is the colorfulness. We bring color. We bring life to what's just bland. And so vibrant. We need to reinforce that. So I think the number one thing we can do with children is compliment them every single day. Every single day, and give them that. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food and shelter, towards self-esteem, all the way towards self-actualization. And we can only do that if we engage. So every time you see a little Black or brown child, give them a compliment.
Yes,
because it resonates with them.
It does. And I love what you said about, what did you learn today?
Yes.
What did you learn today?
Mm-hmm.
Because now, if that little girl says, well, we didn't learn nothing, then now it's up to the parent to take account and go talk to that teacher and be like, okay, how come my daughter didn't
Absolutely.
learn nothing today?
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
love that. What did you
Yeah.
learn today?
Yeah.
That
What was your favorite thing about today, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. What
the
was the best
simplest
thing
things.
you did in class today? Yeah.
Yes, those things, and I'm going to add those to my daily questionnaire form when I talk to young folks. What did you learn
Yes.
today? Right?
Yeah. What's the
Uh,
best thing you could sometimes they would say I didn't learn, but what's the best thing you learned today?
Absolutely, right,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
and I
Mhm.
think I just wanna emphasize, what you said, just the consistency part. Be
Yes.
consistent every day with what how we engage. We gotta be
Mhm.
mindful how we engage young people.
Yes.
I
Yes.
I don't like when people say, "Hey, what's up?"
Mhm.
That is so generic
Yes.
and
Yes. Mhm.
uncommitted.
Yes.
Talk to those young people.
Yep.
Man, how are you feeling today?
Mhm.
What is good today? What how you feeling inside?
Yes. Yes.
What are you thinking about?
Mhm.
Because just because you look good on the outside, where's your mind at? How
Yes. Yeah,
right?
and be
Different.
respectful with them. I call them
Yes,
sir and ma'am,
yes, yeah.
and I
I
just
do that all the
gentlemen.
time.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and they
I
look at
call
you like, "Oh, somebody just called me sir."
Well, it's to your point about instilling that pride amongst themselves. Like,
Yep,
wow, he called me sir. I'm
yep.
worthy of that. Yes, you are
Yes,
worthy, and you are
absolutely.
valuable, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
no, I love that. What did you learn today? We're
Yeah.
definitely going to utilize that. I want to transition and kind of close the show. Or this conversation, which is it's more than a show. It's a great conversation, just about being a black mom.
Mhm.
And I know that's a very vague question, and we can all
Mhm.
sit here and give our explanation. Well, not me, but
Mhm.
black women. So, like, just talk to me about being a black mom, like the brilliance, because for the most part, and this is just me being who I am. For the most part, I don't think the greatest society ever likes to associate love and caring and nurture with black folks,
Mhm.
especially black men.
Yes.
But black women by far over the years have shown their compassion, their love, their enduring spirit. If it was not taking their own kids under their wing and raising them, but the plantations kids as
Mhm.
well. And I know
Right.
that's a big old jump, but I'm just saying,
Right, right.
like, let's speak on it. If you could just go into just being a black mom, a black grandmother as you are,
Mhm.
the pride you have in that. Where did you ever see yourself as a grandmother? Just speak on the joyfulness and
Mhm.
wonderful experiences. Or sometimes there was some struggles too, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm an awesome grandma.
Say that.
Yes, I love being a
Outstanding.
grandmother. It's very easy for me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my background is, and this is very different from very many. I didn't raise my children.
Okay.
When I came here, I lived in Utah, and I married a man there, and then I had 3 children. He was a white man,
Okay.
and then we got divorced, and it was a very uh, acrimonious divorce. So he got to keep the children,
Hmm.
and living in Utah, that's predominantly white, the black lady didn't get the kids,
Wow.
right? And so I had to pay child support for 18 years. So I didn't raise my children.
Mm.
And so, coming from the culture I came from as well, my parents didn't raise us either. We come from a class of people where your relatives raise you because you're a part of nobility. And so you're raised to be, and I have 5 sisters, to
Okay.
be a certain station in life. But my father moved us to Fiji so that we could get an education and be self-sufficient. And so I didn't really know what the concept of mom was.
Mm.
And so growing up, so I believe that's why I became a teacher, because that's where my children are. And so
Gotcha.
what I learned as a child, I instill in these young people, and what I learned from my father, that's how I parent.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because my father was the biggest influence in my life, I learned how to be a grown-up from the perspective of a male.
Mm.
Because I didn't have really a mother figure per se. We were raised by our nannies.
Hmm.
And so my notion of a black mom is, you have to get an education. You have to fight for yourself. You have to have a voice, and you don't let anybody put you down. So it's a fighter in me, right? And I encourage young women to use their voice because my father taught me to use my voice. So I think I teach more like from a male perspective
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
a nurturing perspective. And I'm now learning. In the last 5 years, I think I've become a better teacher because I've learned how to nurture.
Understood.
But now that my children are older, I've learned to build a relationship with them. And
Outstanding.
I
Congratulations.
inherited 2 children, and I have 3 children. And so
Hmm.
2 of my younger children are white, the 3 older ones are mixed.
Hmm.
But we're learning to understand our culture from our different perspectives
Mhm.
and how they were raised, you know. And so I'm still learning too. That's why I'm a
Absolutely.
better grandma than I am a mom,
Wonderful.
because I spoil my grandchildren and I teach them and I do the lessons that I instill in my students. I teach them the creativity and they
Okay.
teach me. So
Right.
most of the time we're hanging out, I'm learning from them.
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
teaching me about culture,
There we
and they're
go.
teaching me about empathy, because they're Generation Z and they have a completely different outlook of the world. So
Yes.
my notion of being a mom, being a Black mom, I'm still learning how to do that, because I'm still building a relationship with my own children in terms of
Wow.
understanding where we are at this time. I can't go back in history and change
Right,
anything.
right, right,
It's
right,
like,
right.
where do we build from here? And I think my passion for maternal passion goes to my students, and
Mhm.
especially, excuse me, now being on the FSUSD governing board, I
Mhm.
look at the little babies
Yes.
and the children, the first graders, the kindergartners, the little ones who haven't
Mhm.
gone to school yet, and that's who I fight for, you
Excellent.
know, and that's where my
Yeah.
maternal instincts have come
That
in. If that
that
helps.
is no, that is amazing. Thank you for sharing. I
Mhm.
wasn't expecting to hear that, but wow, how inspiring,
Mhm.
and then wonderful to hear that. I could definitely see it in the work you do. You definitely have the nurturing heart, the caring heart, you know, absolute empathy.
Mhm.
And I respect and I appreciate everything you do.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming on today, being my first guest of the
Thank
summer
you.
series of Black Women 2023. Mrs. Anna Petero, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate you,
sir.
sis. Right on, right on.
Right on.
And folks, that was our show today. This is the first episode of the summer series, Black Women 2023. Mrs. Anna Petero was our first guest. We're going to have another show next week with another wonderful woman that's going to share her experiences, her ideas, and her thoughts and suggestions and comments, and have the same input that Mrs. Petero shared today. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the show for today. Again, like I always say, have a conversation with someone that doesn't look like you, and you just might learn something if you just shut up and listen.
Yes.
Until next time, Black people, you know I love you. Be well.